Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. As each of you have pointed out, our ability to take appropriate action, both in terms of our own foreign policy and as members of the multinational community, is entirely dependent on the accuracy and of the information that we have with which to understand the situation and chart a path forward. Toward that end, Mr. Chung, you made some very important points around the threats to Canadian businesses operating in China, as well as the threats to Canadian citizens here on Canadian soil from various forms of influence and coercion from the People's Republic of China. So, as parliamentarians, it's our responsibility to be able to provide some information, advice, and a course of action. We need to put perhaps in place legislation that would mitigate or at least protect in some regard both Canadians on Canadian soil from the influence of the People's Republic of China, and to protect to some extent those Canadian businesses operating in China. Could you provide us with some recommendations, specifics on what type of legislation and what actions Canada could take to achieve those two very important goals?
Thank you. So in that connection, I would endorse some of the suggestions made by previous witnesses, in particular, the creation of a point person within the government to address issues regarding threats to Canadian businesses operating in China and Canadian citizens in Canada. And beyond that, the creation of a register of foreign lobbyists, not in the interests of inhibiting people from expressing what they like, but to make sure that people are properly informed as to who is saying what and for what reasons they might be doing so.
Could you cite any examples of those types of threats that you're aware of that have occurred to Canadian businesses in China? And would you have any idea of whether the situation is escalating or whether it is pretty much the same?
I cannot speak directly to what's happening with Canadian businesses in the mainland. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, I've seen reports thus far relating to the British financial institutions, HSBC and Standard Chartered. I would expect that similar pressure will be applied to Canadian institutions, although, again, I cannot speak with any certainty as to whether that has already happened.
You also mentioned about how important it is, obviously, for us to have accurate information, and that there's all kinds of pressures against those who would provide us with that accurate information to not do so because of the threats and consequences that they may face. So how do we know, and what can we do to ensure that we are getting the right information accurately and in timely, so that we can make appropriate and informed decisions?
Fundamentally, I think that a large part of the problem is that when people feel threatened, as the report that many other witnesses have referred to in the past in relation to harassment and intimidation of activists in Canada mentioned, when people are harassed, they try to get advice or help from one particular governmental department or bureau. They're sent to another and another and another until eventually they give up. There should be, ideally, a one-stop shop.
So an integrated approach, an integrated whole of government, not only with a point person, but coordinating between all of the departments so that we understand all the fronts that information is coming in and all the pressures from all corners that are being placed. Is that fair?
That would be a fair characterization, yes.
And thank you very much.